Hey there, Twebs. I hope you're all doing well. So, I want to do a quick video because I want to try my best to give someone who is currently in the center of capital D discourse on Twitter for something she said that many have taken as akin to very TERFy anti-trans rhetoric, and try to give that person the benefit of the doubt and give a response to what she said in a way that is trying to create a constructive conversation. And the reason that I want to do this is that I have very often found that Twitter is not a place where constructive conversations happen, but where conversations fall into antagonistic binaries. So when someone says something that is, yes, kind of a little bit messed up, it ends up leading to people dogpiling on that person or yelling at that person or taking the worst possible presumption of someone's intent with that phrase. Whereas I look at what this person wrote and I can see a way in which this was written by someone who may have been misunderstanding how we talk about or think about transgender issues and talking points, because she has fallen into potential misinformation surrounding trans people. And that's the goal of misinformation. Misinformation around trans people is made to cause wedges between people who, if in an ideal world, would actually have constructive conversations saying like, oh, this is actually why that's an issue or why that's a problem. So I'm going to try my best to offer this video in that vein. And maybe at the end of the day, this person will ultimately reveal that they are a TERF or double down on, transphobic rhetoric. But I'm gonna at least make the attempt because I think it's worth the attempt. So, to stop dancing around the bush here, the person that I'm talking about is Ana Kasparian, and as you can see, I'm looking at my screen here because Ana is one of the hosts on the channel The Young Turks, which is a sort of left-leaning news organization here on YouTube. To be very honest, I don't follow them all that closely. I sometimes catch their videos here and there when they pop up in my feed on an issue that I'm interested in, but I'm not a big follower. So, what Ana has written is this: I'm a woman. Please don't ever refer to me as a person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates. How do people not realize how degrading this is? You can support the transgender community without doing this shit. So on a very surface level, the reason that people are upset at this tweet is it's kind of is falling into very anti-trans rhetoric that we've seen espoused by people like J.K. Rowling, for example. Like literally J.K. Rowling, one of her first sort of revealing anti-trans tweets that she did was, again, using the same line of talking points like, women, wine-bund, oh, no one can use the word woman anymore. And we clearly saw J.K. Rowling fall further and further into anti-trans talking points from there, which is, I think, why people are very worried and possibly angry and upset at Ana for this tweet, because they see this as like a starting place for a TERFy type of pipeline that J.K. Rowling fell into. However, again, giving the benefit of the doubt here, what I could see her possibly thinking is she sees a lot of people using phrases like person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates as phrases that are being used instead of the word woman. She may see articles that have popped up talking about people with uteruses and issues relating to people who have uteruses problems, such as, abortion access. People will just talk about abortion access and that it affects people who have uteruses. And she may see that and think that, oh, they're erasing the word woman. They're not using the word woman when they should be using the word woman, because we relate abortion rights issues to specifically and solely a women's issue. Now, to be very clear, abortion rights is very much targeted at women as a group, and it is a women's rights issue and a very prominent and important women's rights issue. But where the distinction comes down is that using the phrase person with a uterus is not erasing women. It is not used in place of women. It is used because it is actually more specific than the word woman. Because there are people who have uteruses who are not women. I think of trans men and non-binary folks who have uteruses. They have uteruses, and issues of abortion access will affect them, but they are not women. So it's not replacing the word woman, it is using the word to refer to the people that these things affect. And on top of that, not every woman has a uterus or has a functioning uterus for various different reasons. There are numerous different medical reasons that a woman, a cisgender woman, someone who is identified as a woman, will not have a uterus. You have trans women like myself who don't have a uterus either. So again, this is not replacing the word women, it is using the phrase, I should say, to be more specific in the context in which it's used. Now, what typically when people see this, extrapolate that to using sort of the anti-trans disinformation sort of that's floating out there is to assume that because we are using those phrases often in trans affirming spaces, because we're recognizing the existence of trans women and trans men and non-binary folks when we use those phrases, as they may associate that with feeling like, oh, people are telling us not to use the word woman at all. Because they'll say, well, why are you not using the word woman? Because we so often relate women to those phrases in these talking points. And what I want to always point out to people is that no one is saying you can't use the word woman. For example, I am a trans woman and I use the word woman and I identify as a woman. People can and should be allowed to use the word woman whenever and wherever they want if it identifies them and is talking about them as a woman. Even more so, we can use the term woman generally when we talk about women's rights issues or issues that affect women. Like there are issues that affect women, trans and cis, that are targeted directly at women, like misogynistic attacks and things like that. And then there are issues that do affect cis women that don't affect trans women, for example, like abortion rights issues, for example. And I should say don't affect, I mean directly. Obviously, these issues are all about controlling people's bodies, and they all sort of are part of the same fascist narratives. So they do affect us. You know, abortion rights access issues affect trans women as well, because it does affect healthcare stuff and things like that, and misogyny in healthcare, but it's less direct for me than it is for someone who does have a uterus. So I feel like the reason, though, that Ana feels that this is the case is because she feels that she has associated that word woman with having a uterus when we talk about like abortion rights access, for example, for so long, that to see it pop up in trans-affirming spaces in a different context feels like it's erasing women, when that's not actually the case. People totally should use women, 100% use women. I am full support of it, but the issue is it's not about you when we use these phrases. It may include you, but the reason we use these phrases is to be inclusive of everyone in which these issues actually affect. Now, a couple things that I will point out to sort of be conciliatory to her. She points out how she feels degraded by phrases like uterus haver. And that I understand perfectly. I understand how it can feel degrading in a society that often just views women solely as reproductive organs, as just baby-making factories, to see phrases like people who have uteruses as degrading, because she may feel like it's essentializing people to their reproductive organs, especially when we live in a society that does that often towards many cis women. And I understand that. I understand that so much. But again, here's where I would say context is key, because the use of these phrases is not meant to degrade people or to essentialize people to their bodily functions, but to talk about people's bodies specifically in context surrounding where these issues affect us. I would never go around when I'm trying to recognize someone's full humanity, use the phrase person with a uterus. Like I wouldn't go up to someone on the street, that I don't know or whatever and say like, hey, person with the uterus, how you doing? Maybe some like fundamentalist Christian types might, but I wouldn't. Like there's a difference between like talking about issues and specific context and maybe scientific context or, political context where that is important, and then difference between like everyday people. So I understand where the feeling of those phrases being degrading comes from, but I would just point out to look at the context in which these phrases are being used, and who it is for, and maybe don't, and again, I'm not trying to tell her how to feel or what to do, but I would say, maybe analyze why you're taking offense and see if it's, something that you're dealing with, or if it is because someone's being degrading to you, or if you're maybe, it's brushing up against issues and traumas that I think all of us feel in a society that does essentialize people quite often this way, even when the space you're in is not being intentionally dehumanizing in that way. And the final thing that I wish to end on here is she ends on this phrase that says, you can support the transgender community without doing this shit. It's not supporting the trans community to say we can't use the word woman, because trans people also wish to use the word woman. We want to use the word woman. We encourage and hope people use the word woman for themselves. In fact, we want to open the ability for more people to say the word woman and talk about themselves as women. That's kind of the point. And the reason that I think she is saying this is because I think she is believing not what trans people are actually saying, but is believing the misinformation around trans people, believing the TERF line of rhetoric that trans people are saying you can't use the word woman. That is a disinformation tactic used by TERFs and anti-trans people beyond TERFs to say, like, oh, we're erasing what women means. We're erasing the binaries between man and woman. We're erasing what it means, these phrases. That is the disinformation tactic. No trans person is actually saying that, but TERFs are saying that trans people are saying that. And again, this is where I want to try to give the benefit of the doubt, because one of the reasons that those rhetorics, those anti-trans rhetorics are so powerful is because they do couch themselves in the veneer, the aesthetic of feminism. They pretend to be feminist. They say, oh, we're gender critical feminists, and saying we're just trying to protect women, when really they're not at all. They're just trying to incept their anti-trans talking points using the aesthetic of feminism. But quite often, many people who get radicalized into these movements fall into that because they buy into that aesthetic of feminism. I've seen many TERFs get radicalized that way because of this very thing. And it is reinforced by when we have these conversations antagonistically. You know, there is a part of me that sometimes wonders, and at this point it doesn't matter, but there is a part of me that wonders that, you know, part of the reason that J.K. Rowling herself fell further into these pipelines of radicalization is because of the sort of antagonistic way we come at each other on social media. And I don't necessarily think that that's a fault of anyone specifically. That is just how social media is set up, especially places like Twitter. It is set up for us to view each other in antagonistic ways, to see someone as, oh, I'm going to essentialize you as this one thing. You said a slightly TERFy looking thing, I'm going to come at you as a TERF, and then we're going to be sort of viewing it as like a me versus you sort of way. So it's either those you're for me or against me, which is a very fascistic line of thought. And I'm not saying all lines of thought that include that are fascistic, but it's why we end up seeing these systems ultimately reinforcing fascist thoughts, because they create these binaries. And I sort of wonder if we didn't have that, if J.K. Rowling might have been able to have constructive conversations and pull back from TERFy rhetoric. But instead, she was put into a system that creates these antagonistic rhetorics, and she just fell further and further into people telling her that she was okay and she was a good person, because that's how she viewed herself. That does not remove the blame from her. She is a human being, an adult, and, you know, should not have fallen into harmful rhetorics, and so she should be held accountable. But I do see where this pipeline in our world occurs. I understand, I want to hold people accountable for, you know, the actions that they take, but also understanding we live in systems that create people and these pipelines generally. So when I look at the discourse around Ana right now, I am just concerned. It's not to, you know, if Ana falls further down a TERFy pipeline, that is on her and she should be held accountable for that. However, I do see a moment here that could swing either way. And I hope that we can create a conversation that is constructive and at this moment gives her best possible reading of intent we can give her, which I think is, you know, what I've articulated here, to create a conversation that is hopefully constructive. And the other thing, too, with these rhetorics is that they are intentionally trying to frame trans people as the bullies. Again, when we create these antagonistic rhetorics and people ask to be considered and nuance is lost, it allows people to see trans people as like, oh, you're the bullies, you're bullying, you're telling me what to do, you're trying to destroy my free speech. Again, not saying that this is what Ana's saying, but this is where that sort of narrative gets generated. You know, we saw it a whole bunch with J.K. Rowling again, too. They're coming at me, they're calling me a TERF, and they're da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Again, sort of framing trans people as the bullies, when we're asking just to be considered and for other people to be considered. Because at the end of the day, I am not a person with a uterus. That phrase doesn't refer to me, but I am a woman. And so, like, when I say we should use the phrase people with a uterus, it's not to essentialize women who have uteruses, but it's to try to be inclusive of my non-binary and trans men siblings who are that way. But it does create these sort of antagonistic narratives. It's again why you saw things like trans people being called bullies. I mean, pick your phrase in free speech and Harry Potter video game nonsense. Like, all of that stuff, it's just sort of trying to frame trans people as bullies when we're asking to be considered. But that nuance is lost because of the way that online social media frames discourses in binaries. Often heightened binaries as well. Like, nothing on Twitter is just a calm thing. It is, everything's at 110%. So if you're a little, maybe your phrase is a little bit turfy, then you're 100% a TERF and we need to hold you accountable now. Again, that's not everybody, but that's how, like, the feeling comes across as like a general discourse to everyone involved, and most especially the person at the center. As someone myself who has been at the center of dog pile campaigns, even where I felt that there might have been legitimate criticism of the things that I've said, sometimes I don't think that that's the case, but sometimes there was. Even for me, when I'm like, yeah, I can see the criticism here, it still feels like I'm being attacked by hundreds of people coming at me in very escalating ways that assume the worst possible intent of me. And my initial impetus in those moments, I'm not saying this is what I do or should do and should not be held responsible for if I do it, but my initial impetus, because of the emotional weight of all that, is to be like, fuck these people, which is what I shouldn't do, but it's what you kind of emotionally feel, understandably, when you have hundreds of people coming at you, some being understandable and constructive, and others being like, why are you the worst person ever? You know, it's hard to find the middle ground, even when most people are being rational people, because our brains remember the worst things and social media heightens those things. And just to wrap out here, I'll kind of reiterate, I don't know Ana at all, really. I don't really watch the Young Turks. I'm sure maybe some people will come forward and say this isn't surprising, or there's other problems with some of the things that she's said in the past. I don't know that, so I'm not endorsing all of her views, nor am I trying to, you know, downplay them if there's something she said or done that is absolutely horrific that I should be made aware of or something like that. But I'm just coming at a person who I see potential to give a best possible reading to in the moment, and I'm just attempting my best, not only for her, but also for others who may find themselves in that situation, whether it be the people themselves or loved ones or people who care about them, because I don't see this being a situation that just happens on Twitter, but I see this happening in families, in homes, with parents and loved ones, having this exact type of conversation played out, and many people not knowing how to respond to that. You know, if you do see a family member starting to espouse maybe TERF or rhetoric, being like, yeah, support trans people, but, you know, why do they keep saying you can't say woman? You know, I just want to say the word woman. You can now go and say, well, actually, trans people say you should say the word woman. It is highly encouraged, but here's the reasons for when we wouldn't use the word woman and why. And so I hope this is helpful in that vein, at the very least. So that's my 2 cents on that. Hopefully, you know, I don't know if she's going to see this. If she did, Ana, I seriously hope that this video has been illuminating, and I hope it is received in the intent in which it was made. And more than likely, she's not going to see it, but I hope that that is taken that way if you do. And if she doesn't see this, but this video just gets shared out there, I hope it is helpful to other people who may be in the same sort of space that Ana is in. Anyways, I love you all. I hope you're all taking care, and live long and prosper, everyone.